Lord, my dogs. Anyways, so what I have here is, this is the actual like little plugin. Right here is another plugin. This is purely just for the visuals. But right now what the plugin does is it instantiates a graph, an audio processor graph, and then this toggle button right here toggles this gain knob that attenuates the gain of the incoming audio. So basically, audio from this file player goes through this plugin, the plugin we're making, and then the output goes into this graph. To this other plugin, which shows visual representation of the audio wave. Right now, so basically, before I actually get into the mini demo, what's happening is whenever you press this toggle gain, it actually takes away the visuals of the slider right here, or the knob, and then it also dynamically removes a node from the audio processor graph. So we're using a graph to basically take care of our audio processing. And I'll show you the graph right here real quick. Let me pull it up. This is a little sketch I just made. So it's kind of jank, but bear with me real quick. So let me show you. So basically our audio processor graph, we start with our inputs, and our inputs point to nodes. So everything is a node. So our input's a node, our output's a node. And we have two of these, right? One for our like first channel. Usually our first channel is going to be our left speaker or left side of our headphone. And then again, we have another graph for our right side channel, which will be channel 2 or channel 1 technically if we're doing like index values. But basically, we loop over these channels and then we apply these effects to each channel, right? And we're using a graph, right? So each effect will be a node. So right now we have a gain effect node, but later on we'll have effects like reverb, EQ, delay, etc. Right? Now each one of these nodes can dynamically, using this graph, can be changed in place. So like, let's say we had another node. Give me 1 second. Now let's say we had like a reverb, right? So our reverb node, depending on where our user will, change our graph, can either be above, in front of, or in next to the chain of our gain or distortion, whatever. The user can dynamically change the order of the effects taking place, right? And that's the whole point of our effect art plugin. And now, even though it's simple, right? So right here, all we really see is just one toggle button. The vision is to have our sidebar, our toolbar on the side, to be a bunch of these like little buttons or these little components that you could drag around within the sidebar. Now, whenever they change the order in the sidebar, it'll also change the order that the effect is being applied in our graph, right? So, give me 1 second. Hold up. So basically, like, I'll do a quick sketch. So you have our bunch of our little nodes indicating our effects, right? These will be our effects. And then on the main bar will be where the user will be able to actually go in and control the effects, right? So you would have our different effects being displayed within here. And et cetera, et cetera. You'd have them down. So the user changing the orders that the effects are being placed will allow us to change the order in which these effects will be moved onto our actual audio processing block. Right. And we already implemented it with this toggle button. Basically, a toggle button will be changed into these little sidebar components that will correspond to their individual components within the main GUI or main user interface. Right. And then whenever you, these will also, yeah, they're technically a button because it will do the same thing like the button right here that I have. So basically, the main takeaway is like these buttons will display the parameters of the effects dynamically, right? Obviously, this is simple right now, but it'll get more complex as we go. But that's basically the structure of the program right now. Now, there is a bug in this program, and I'll only have been toggling it on and off without changing the parameters for that reason. So whenever I change a parameter, it will actually crash. But that's something I need to figure out. But basically, let me show you. Let me show you real quick. So I'll show this. That is so loud. Hold up. Is that loud for y'all? Can I even hear this?
Yeah, we can hear it.
Okay. Is it loud?
Yeah, we can hear that. We can hear you.
Okay. Is it loud or is it like good volume?
From my perspective, it was like the same volume as your voice.
Okay. That's good. So basically, I'll show you. I'll attenuate this gain slider so it's down. And I'm only gonna do it once because it will mess up. But were you able to hear a difference at all? I hope so. I mean,
Definitely.
So, but that's the basic gist of how we're structuring the plugin itself. Is where you're using these components, which will be buttons, movable buttons along a toolbar that will allow our users to actually go in and change the order of effects. That's all I wanted to showcase with the progress of the plugin right now. If y'all want, I can actually go in and show you the source code and maybe give y'all a rundown of how this is working. But right now, I'm going to switch it over to our website. So let me go into that real quick. But let me know, because I did learn a lot doing it, and it was pretty fun. Ooh, hold up. Okay, I use my personal website for some of the stuff, by the way, so I'll just show you. Hold up, give me 1 second. Now, we haven't made that much progress since I showed y'all it in that one screenshot, but it is responsive, so I have used breakpoints to actually change the layout of the screen. And then the nav bar does also turn into a hamburger menu for mobile screens like that. I think I want to change the background later on to, like, I don't know, something more colorful. Not as in like the color itself, but like the actual like images. Maybe like put a little like spaceship, something. You know what I mean? But for sure, I do like the way the nav bar came out. I think I want to change the font. That could be a later thing. But yeah, so far, what do y'all think of the website? I do want to do something with this. Anyways, I'll show you like on different screens using the inspect menu. So like this is how it'll show on like a iPhone 14. I think for sure on smaller screens we could maybe make this. I mean, make it so like they can't download it because this won't be something that we could make it for like actual iOS and whatnot, but I don't see the point right now. But yeah, like an iPad Air, this is how it'll look and whatnot. Surface Pro. Did y'all want me to go through the source code with y'all to show you basically like how it's working? Maybe go through a rundown of the juice syntax. So y'all, once we get started with that, or y'all get started with that, y'all can actually understand maybe a gist of what's going on, or we got it for today. I think I'll show y'all a little bit so far of how it's working. Excuse me. With the actual source code. So I'm gonna close this real quick. And now I'm gonna switch over to Xcode. So I haven't been using the file from the GitHub because I made a new like little project for this. But I'll change it and upload the changes later. So there's a lot of these folders. Don't mind most of them. Only mind these 6 in the source file. So basically what's happening is whenever you create a new project in Juice, it links library codes using all the modules. All right, so these are all just like header files for the modules. Right here, you see? So these are all like the actual like code that you'll be using. And so that's what these 2 files for. The resources, these are like basically the settings you give in Producer for your plugins, right? So you have your like bundle name, your what it's gonna show, and whatnot. So that's what this is. The frameworks, these are just the frameworks that Juice uses that you can actually add on creating a project using Producer to use different frameworks to help build your plugin. So you can use like WebKits for UI and other like core MIDI for you to help with MIDI information. But for us, we don't really care about MIDI. And our UI, we're going to try to use OpenGL for that. And now we'll just use the regular Juice drawing UI. The product section right here will showcase like what it exports as, right? So you have your VST3, your component, which is an AU folder for Apple devices using like Logic Pro. Appendix, I don't know for sure what that is. The .app is actually for the standalone plugin, so you can actually open it as a lone plugin, like it's for itself. And then the VST3 helper is basically a little file that all these like there's more helper files. I don't know why I didn't show, but basically it just has all the library code that you previously written, so that the compiler doesn't need to rerun the whole file. It just needs to rerun the changes that you've made. This manifest helper, I don't know exactly what this is, but that's what these files are. Now you have the core 4 files will be your plugin processor, header, and C++ file, and then your plugin editor, C++ and header file. Now, if you haven't worked with C++, basically a header file is where you go in and you define your classes. And now your classes will have your functions within it, and this is where you actually go in and you define your functions. You're not creating the actual like code for it just yet, but you're defining that it exists. And so whenever you go into your like if you go into a plugin processor, these are actually where you go in and you declare your functions and what you want to do with them. So for all classes inheriting something else, so that's what this is. So there are colon right here, so our like our class delay audio processor, and then this colon right here, public juice audio processor. What this is basically saying is we have a new class named delay audio processor, and we're inheriting from this public class, from the juice namespace called audio processor. So basically, these are this is you declaring a child class from this parent class in another folder, right? And these double colons right here, this is a scope, right? So you have your namespace juice, and within juice, you have these different classes, right? So in juice, you have this audio processor class, right? And actually, in the audio processor class, you have more classes that will show. Let me see if I can get one. Maybe not right now. But I can show you how later. Basically, that's what this is doing right here when you define a class. And now you have your public and private variables. So these are member variables. Your public member variables are functions that can be used, functions or other variables that can be used by other classes outside of this class. Or so all of these can be used by something else. But your private member variables can only be used by this class specifically. Now we have all these parameters right here, all these functions. Basically, all of these are needed whenever you call a new instantiation of the juice audio processor class. Right, say for your declaration, I don't know what this tilde declaration is for exactly, but you have your prepare to play. So the main ones that we should really focus on are the prepare to play. Our processor block has an editor, and then these MIDI effects. So our prepare to play is basically what Juice uses to help create the plugin before we start using the processor block. Basically, it gives some settings and whatnot. Now, our processor block, I'm going to show y'all within the C++ file. So this right here. So what our processor block is doing is we get so many samples per second, right? So the way audio processing works is you get each sample that you're given from an audio waveform, and you're doing something to each one of those samples, like you're doing a process, right? So that's the whole point of the DSP algorithm, is that you're changing each one of those sample points on an audio waveform. Now, if you were to do it where each sample is going into your processor block, you're going to end up having a plugin that's really like jittery, because it's doing a lot of calculations really, really, really quick, right? Because, excuse me, like the average sample rate is 48 kilohertz. And if you don't know what that means, it's 48,000 times per second. That means you're getting 48,000 samples per second. And this is just for one audio stream, right? Now, usually people like to listen to things in stereo, so you have a left and right channel. So now you have 48 times 2 audio samples. So now you have 96,000 samples per second needing to be worked on. Now, what the parent DAW does, so what you just saw, so this audio plugin host, what this does is basically sends out so many samples per second, right? Usually it's like 512 samples at a time. Not per second. I know I said per second, but it usually sends 512 samples at a time, so that's easier for your plugin to do processing on the audio block instead of needing to go through each one as it comes in, right? It comes in blocks, and that's what this whole processor block does, right? So this whole thing is like juice, audio buffer, flow, ampersand buffer. Basically, we're using this name buffer to reference this audio buffer parameter, right? Instead of having to manually type juice audio buffer app float for each one of these. So if I wanted to do like buffer clear, if I didn't put this reference for buffer, I would have to write this whole thing right here. Now our other parameter is our MIDI buffer, which is MIDI information is basically just like, you know, if you ever see somebody play like notes and then the plugin, it does stuff, that's MIDI information. It's just basically, what do you call it? It tells a plugin what to do based on what you're pressing, what the MIDI channel is. Like if you're pressing a MIDI keyboard and it plays notes, basically the keyboard is sending information to your plugin and it's getting to use that MIDI channel at that point. When at. So these are the two parameters this processor block takes in. And you do the DSP algorithm within here. Right. So this is our rebuild graph function that was in our header file. And basically this just defines like how we want to rebuild our audio graph when we add or remove something. So it's like if gain, then we want to add our gain processor node, right? So like I said earlier, each one of our effects will be a node in our audio stream. And now this is what we're doing here. So we're using our graph to add a node, and our node will be our gain processor. And then right here, what I was saying, we have two audio streams. Like we go back. So I said we have two audio streams right here. What this is basically doing is it goes through the total number of channels that were given, and then you're adding the effect node to each one of those channels, their own graph. Right, and then in our else statement, we're doing the opposite. So we're just going from our input node to our output node. Right. Add gain node, remove gain node. These are just for the graph. Has an editor. This was giving me such a hard time earlier and right now. Basically, this whole thing is just it's asking if there's a UI component to this audio processor, and which we do, right? So we have our plugin editor right here that actually shows the UI, and this is basically doing what I just told you earlier. So we set the size of the plugin. Right here, we're making the text of our button show, and then we're gonna make it visible. Whenever we click this button, then we have this function right here. So if it's if the gain node is active, then whenever we click it, we want to remove the gain and then set this gain slider to visible, to invisible. So it'll be set to false. Now if the gain is not active, then we want to add the gain node to our graph, and then we want to make it visible, right? So this is just making sure that we are attaching the gain parameter that's actually changing to the slider that we make visible. And at the end, we're just making the slider visible or not. And at the end, the resize is where you actually go in and you set the bounds and the location of your components. In our paint, this is actually like what gets shown on the screen. So you saw the gray background and you saw the text that said effect rack written in white. That's what this is doing. So your paint function takes in the parameter of graphics. And so now we're using the juice graphics as a reference to G. So instead of having to write juice graphics, fill all, yada, 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 we can just use G instead to use everything in this graphics class. So we're using fill all to fill in the background. We're setting the stroke color to white using the colors class. We're setting the font to 20 like 20 as in like the size, like the font size. And then we're drawing this text on the top, the center at the top. And yeah, so the same thing with the juice processor. So as you notice, the juice processor doesn't have an editor because our gain doesn't have its separate editor at the moment. It will, because what we want to do, again, like I said, is to create these components onto the screen dynamically, right? So we want to showcase these components on a window to the side and change the order dynamically. So basically, each one will have their own little editor for us to do that. But right now we don't. And I'm pretty sure there's a workaround where we don't need to. But yeah, so we have our gain parameter. Like if we go back to our plugin editor, remember we were attaching our gain parameter to the slider. And that's what this is right here, defined in our gain processor. And then we have parameters that it takes in, and this is defined up here. Right, so we have our parameters of gain, right? And then this is the range that we have for our gain. And then our processor block for our gain, this is basically where we are changing the volume of our thing. So as in the demo, you heard like the change in the volume of it. That's what's happening in our gain processor block, which is right here. But yeah, that's basically how this plugin works. The main takeaway is the fact that we're using a graph to showcase, to append our effect nodes to it, right? And this is basically important because that's how we want all of our effects to be. We want it in a graph so that we can easily change the order of them instead of having a fixed order for our end user, right? We want our end user to have as much like freedom of music expression as they want. Do you have questions or anything for me? Well, if nobody has any questions for now, then I guess we'll call that a night for us. Thank y'all for joining me and for listening to me and showcasing the work we have so far.